Republic of the Philippines.
The 37th session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. May we ask Senator Joel Villanueva to lead the chamber in prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Heavenly Father, we come before you and humbling ourselves, knowing that indeed without you we can do nothing. We thank you for this day that you have given us, and we pray that you give us your treasury of wisdom from heaven and allow us to perform our duties and responsibilities as senators of the Republic of the Philippines. We pray that you bless every family represented in this August chamber, and we continue to pray for our beloved country, the Philippines. We thank you, we praise you, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
Including Senator Pangilinan and Senator Angara. With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, we'd like to just, before we take up official business, we'd just like to greet in the gallery today. We have visitors from all the way from Bakakay, Albay, Zamora Memorial College Alumni Credit Cooperative, who just took their oath from your chairman on cooperatives. We have also with us today, Mr. President, guest of Senator Ralph Recto from Barangay Chanagdong. Hanag, how is it? Mahana Jong from Saraya, Quezon, Barangay 1 and 2, as well as Barangay Lutukan, Malabag, and Barangay Limbon. They are all from Saraya, Quezon that are here with us today, Mr. President, on the right side.
I see the presence also of
We have with us
Congressman Dimaporo.
Congressman Dimaporo is with us
Bobby
as well,
Dimaporo.
Mr. President, of Lanao del Norte. He's my fellow region mate, Mr. President.
Yes, yes. Welcome to our guests. Welcome to the Senate.
And also, Eileen Ermita, Congresswoman Eileen Ermita Buhayin is with us here as well, Mr. President,
Congresswoman Eileen.
from
yes.
Batangas. Mr. President, I move that we
The journal.
dispense with the reading of the journal of the 36th session Tuesday, November 26, 2019, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Journals approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to proceed with the reference of business.
Before we
President, wala tayong mic.
before we proceed with the reference of business, the session is suspended. Session resumed.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. Do we have a mic? Hello? 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 Is it me you're looking for? Narinig ba ako? Hello? Hello? Yes, okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. We have some bit of technical problems with our microphone. But, Mr. President, move for the reference of business. Proceed to the reference of business.
Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of business, message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2019, it passed House Number 4664 entitled An Act Instituting Reforms in Real Property Valuation and Assessment in the Philippines, reorganizing the Bureau of Local Government Finance and appropriating funds therefore, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
To the Committee on Ways and Means, Local Government and Finance.
Bills on first reading, Senate Number 1191, an act appropriating the sum of 6 billion pesos as supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2019 and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Pangilinan.
To the Committee on Rules.
Senate Number 1192, an act requiring the completion of an economics and personal finance literacy course as an elementary, secondary, tertiary, and technical vocational graduation requirement in public and private schools, local universities and colleges, state and private colleges and universities, and technical vocational schools and centers, mandating professional development for EPF teachers, teaching financial literacy to EPF partners, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Higher Education, and Finance.
Senate Number 1193, an act further amending Section 32 of Republic Act Number 8424, otherwise known as the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997, as amended and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Gatchalian.
Refer to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate Number 1195, an act authorizing the use of the rice subsidy as provided for under the Pantawid Pampamilyang Pilipino Program for Peace in the General Appropriations Act of 2019 for the purchase of palay from farmers, mandating for the purpose the DSWD, in coordination with the Department of Agriculture and NFA, to buy palay from the local farmers from the provinces of Pangasinan, Ilocos Norte, Cagayan, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, Mindoro Oriental, Mindoro Occidental, Tarlac, Nueva Ecija, Zamboanga del Sur, and Iloilo, and distribute rice subsidy in the form of actual rice instead of cash assistance to qualified beneficiaries, introduced by Senator Villar.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Social Justice, and Finance.
Senate Number 1196, an act establishing a do not contact registry for purpose of regulating the sending out of unsolicited messages or calls and providing penalties thereof, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Science and Technology and Public Services.
Senate Number 1197, an act granting lifetime validity of Philippine passports issued to senior citizens, further amending for the purpose Section 10 of Republic Act Number 8239, otherwise known as the Philippine Passport Act of 1996, as amended, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committee on Foreign Relations.
Senate Number 1198, an act regulating the practice of the agriculture profession in the Philippines, creating for the purpose a professional regulatory board for agriculturists and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization.
Senate Number 1199, an act authorizing the Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, in coordination with the National Food Authority, NFA, to purchase palay from local farmers using the rice subsidy as provided under the Pantawid Pampamilyang Pilipino Program for Peace in the General Appropriations Act, GA of 2019, and to distribute rice subsidy in the form of actual rice instead of cash assistance to qualified beneficiaries, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Social Justice, and Finance.
Communications, letters from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified or authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15A of Republic Act Number 7653, the New Central Bank Act. Circular numbers 1058, 1059, and 1060 dated 15 November 2019, and circular letter number CL 2019-083 dated 15 November 2019.
To the Committee on Banks. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 4228. This is the,
4228.
maybe if I sit here. Okay na yun. Pwede na rin, Mr. President, if they have a karaoke mic, we can use that. And I can interview our members one by one. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 4228 under Committee Report number 18. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Consideration is in order.
Mr. President, we recognize the sponsor, Senator Sonny Angara, to once again sponsor the measure. We are in the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Juan Edgardo Angara is recognized. Chairman of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader and dear colleagues. Your Committee on Finance is ready to present highlights of the amendments to the General Appropriations Bill, or GAB, based on the invaluable contributions of our colleagues and vice chairpersons. For the DepEd, we augmented the budget of the Department of Education for its Education Service Contracting Program to fund the proposed increase in the Teacher Salary Subsidy, or TSS. There is also additional allocation for National Assessment Systems for Basic Education, Basic Education Curriculum, Literacy and Numeracy Program, Student Assistance Program for those who excel in sports, Special Education Program, Voucher Program for non-DepEd public schools, School-Based Feeding Program, as suggested by several of our colleagues. Mr. President, we also provided funds to implement the law enacted earlier this year mandating the conservation and restoration of Gabaldon and other heritage schools. We also increased the DepEd's Quick Response Fund for the repair of schools and the budget for school electrification for the benefit of unenergized schools. To address the gaps in resources and facilities of schools located in geographically isolated and disadvantaged and conflict-affected areas, an additional amount will be allocated for DepEd's Last Mile Schools program to the tune of 6 billion pesos. The DepEd will also get additional allocation for the voucher program for private senior high schools to the tune of 5.17 billion. Additional funding has also been given to the Early Childhood Care and Development Council, or ECCD, the National Book Development Board, or NBDB, and the National Council for Children's Television, or NCCT. For our state universities and colleges, we also provided additional funding in the amount of 1.158 billion for our SUCs, or state universities and colleges, to provide for an increase for their research programs, for the conduct of sports and culture-related activities, and for new buildings and facilities. The UP system was also increased, the National University and its campuses, for various research programs, for the construction of additional facilities such as upgrading of classrooms, improvement of fiber optic network. Additional allocation was also provided for 644 million for the Philippine General Hospital for the purchase of advanced medical equipment intended to improve medical services to our countrymen, including the linear accelerator discussed on the floor to help fight cancer, as moved by our colleagues, and for the supplementary funding to the hospital's medical assistance for indigents. Meanwhile, Mr. President, the increase in the budget of TESDA, or the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, will provide for the implementation of the Philippine Labor Force Competencies and Competitiveness Program, or the Tulong Trabaho Act of Senator Joel, as part of the promotion, development, and implementation of quality education and skills. For health and nutrition, we've increased the budget of the Department of Health to support the agency's drive to protect our children through vaccination, to prevent the spread of disease, and to nurture healthier Filipinos. Additional funding will strengthen the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM, help build public sanitary toilets, help promote mental health, retain the jobs of our health workers, augment the funding for equipment of various hospitals, and continue the department's medical assistance for indigents. For our nurses, Mr. President, we have earmarked additional funds worth 3.173 billion to set aside under the MPBF to upgrade the salaries of Nurse 1 and Nurse 2 positions in compliance with the October 2019 Supreme Court decision in the case of Ang Nars Party List versus Executive Secretary, upgrading the minimum salary of government nurses from salary grade 11 to salary grade 15, pursuant to Republic Act 9173. Our proposed budget also covers an increase of at least 3,300 more hospital beds around the country as mandated by recently enacted laws. Mr. President, we've also increased the appropriation for the PhilHealth, or Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, for the implementation of the Universal Health Care Law. The appropriations of the Philippine Heart Center, the National Kidney and Transplant Institute, the Lung Center of the Philippines, and the Philippine Children's Medical Center were also increased to help more of our countrymen who need access to health care. Under the Department of Social Welfare and Development, we provided funds for the supplementary feeding program for undernourished children aged 3 to 5, sustainable livelihood programs, protective services, and assistance for individuals and families in difficult circumstances. Additional allocation was also provided for disaster response and rehabilitation and rice assistance program for victims of calamities. Attached agencies like the Council for Welfare of Children and the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Council and National Commission on Indigenous Peoples also received additional funding for the implementation of Republic Act 11188, the special protection of children in situations of armed conflict, as well as for the construction of Bahay Pag-asas, among others, Mr. President. To give additional support to the newly created Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, or DSUD, the Senate also increased the department's budget, which will help in the implementation of the Housing Emergency Financial Support Program. The budget increase of the Department of Labor and Employment and the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration is to help our workers, OFWs, and job seekers alike through programs like emergency employment and promotion of entrepreneurship and community enterprises under the DLIP, or DOLE Integrated Livelihood and Emergency Employment Program, the TUPAD, the Job Search Assistance through the pesos, and the mechanisms to end child labor. The OWA will also get additional allocation for the emergency repatriation of our OFWs. For the Department of Agriculture, we've set aside funding for many of their new programs, including the establishment of a Sagip-Saka Coordination Center in BARM, Collaborative Provincial Agricultural and Fisheries Extension System, National Soil Health Program, Kabuhayan at Kaunlaran ng Kababayang Katutubo or 4Ks project, the Inclusive Agribusiness Incubation Program, the Young Farmers Program, the Agripreneurship Program, and the construction of a designated cold examination area as part of the quarantine services of the Bureau of Animal Industry. To realize the Department of Agrarian Reform's goal to be a land acquisition and distribution free by 2022, we have allocated a budget for this purpose, as well as funding for landowners' compensation for the covered lands. We support the President's directive to complete the distribution of agricultural lands before the end of his term. We are also funding the support for parcelization of lands for individual titling or project split, which is one of the priority projects of the Duterte administration, so that agrarian reform beneficiaries could own their own lands and have their own titles. We also included a special provision involving a significant increase under unprogrammed appropriations for the utilization of excess tariff revenues from rice importation, which will serve as a form of relief for our local farmers who may be affected by any drop in palay prices pursuant to the rice tariffication law. In the realm of national security, Mr. President, the Department of National Defense, Office of the Secretary, will be provided an additional amount for the implementation of Task Force Balik-Loob and for its ECLIP program for rebel returnees. The Philippine Army will be given 920 million for the immediate activation of one infantry division to directly address the continuing threat posed by the Abu Sayyaf group in Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi or Basulta areas. Meanwhile, the Philippine Air Force is provided an additional amount to fund the development of Colonel Ernesto Rabina Air Base and construction of various air base facilities. More funds are also allotted to the AFP General Headquarters to fund the AFP's campaign to end the country's insurgency problem. Meanwhile, the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office, or PVAO, will receive additional funds to augment the Veterans Hospitalization and Medical Care Program and for the benefits of these veterans. The Veterans Memorial Medical Center will also get an additional amount of 150 million for drugs and medicines and hiring of workers. With respect to the campaign for justice and peace and order, Mr. President, the DOJ is given additional funding for several projects, hiring of coordinators for the Witness Protection Security Program, the purchase of BUCORS, or the Bureau of Corrections, medical and dental equipment, communication equipment and canine dogs, for NBI's funds and modernization, acquisition of motor vehicles and military equipment, and scientific criminal investigation and services, as well as the Office of the Solicitor General, or OSG's capacity building for lawyers, and the purchase of information technology equipment, Mr. President. To help our institutions and promote the rule of law, we increased the budget of the judiciary to include the judges at large law meant to decongest our courts and to provide speedier justice for our countrymen. There are increases in the budget of the Supreme Court and lower courts for the maintenance of halls of justice nationwide, for transportation equipment, and for hazard pay. Increases were also given to the Sandigan Bayan, Court of Appeals, and Court of Tax Appeals. There will also be increases for the Commission on Audit and the Office of the Ombudsman to support their efforts to deepen good governance in the country. For the DILG, we've also added funds to the Department of Interior and Local Government for the implementation of its LCAC program, its BK or Bantay Corruption program, its environmental protection and disaster resiliency initiatives, disaster training and equipment program to various LGUs, its Lupong Tagapamayapa Incentives Award, and for the construction of the Emergency 911 Building and Command Center. The Philippine National Police, or PNP, will also receive more funds, 1.529 billion, for its efforts to restore peace in the countryside, LCAC, for the intelligence and counterintelligence activities of the PNP Anti-Kidnapping Group and internal security operations, and for the maintenance of newly procured H-125 helicopter, patrol vehicles, rubber boats, high-speed tactical watercrafts, newly completed police stations and crime laboratories, as well as provincial mobile force companies, Mr. President. For PIDEA, we increased their budget for anti-drug operations. This will include training expenses of drug enforcement officers, procurement of short firearms, communication equipment, uniforms, Raman spectroscopy and X-rays, and establishment of satellite offices in the Bureau of Corrections. For the Commission on Human Rights, there is additional funding to account for financial assistance to human rights victims and families, support for full operationalization of the different human rights observatory units, and Centers Management Office operationalization of the Interim National Preventive Mechanism. In the quest for peace to reign in our land, Mr. President, for the Office of the Presidential Advisor for Peace, or OPAP, their increase will finance their Pamana program that includes normalization program in the Bangsamoro region, funding for farm equipment, water systems, housing for former combatants, solar panels, and TESDA training centers. The National Commission on Muslim Filipinos, or NCMF, has also received additional funding to provide support for the development and promotion of madrasa education, Sharia program, and domestic halal development. The budget of the Department of Public Works and Highways was increased to fund various infrastructure projects, including construction of bridges, roads, water supply, and other projects. Also increased was the budget of the Department of Information and Communications Technology for the development and management of ICT and cybersecurity policies, development of our integrated business permit and licensing system, implementation of the National Broadband Program, and the free Wi-Fi internet access in public places and SUCs, or state colleges and universities. The budget of the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, or MMDA, was also increased to revive and to restore the Pasig River ferry system as a viable transportation option in NCR. In the realm of trade and tourism, and to make a stronger push for local brands and producers here and abroad, we have increased the DTI budget, or Department of Trade and Industry, to fund more shared service facilities, more negosyo centers, support more entrepreneurs under the OTOP Next Gen and Go Local programs, as well as help our trade attachés market our exports overseas, to revitalize the testing center of the Bureau of Philippine Standards, to allow more Philippine businesses and medium and small enterprises, micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, to showcase their products such as food, fashion, and home products here and abroad. After all, Mr. President, today's MSMEs could be tomorrow's growth industries. And to help prepare existing Filipino industries for the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, marked by such technological changes as big data, robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence. Today's startup, Mr. President, could be tomorrow's disruptor. For the Department of Tourism, we provided support for tourism promotion efforts, allocating funds to the Intramuros Administration, Nayong Pilipino, and the TIEZA, or Tourism Infrastructure and Enterprise Zone Authority. In the realm of innovation, we have increased the budget of the DOST, or the Department of Science and Technology, in support of the Harmonized National Science Technology Agenda, and provided funding for innovation-promoting programs such as the CRADLE, or Collaborative Research and Development to Leverage Philippine Economy, the Space Technology and Applications Mastery and Innovation and Advancement Program, also known as Stamina for Space, and the Niche Center in the Regions for Research and Development, or NICER. The newly enacted Philippine Innovation Act, or Republic Act 11293, will also receive funding for its Innovation Fund, from which grants will be issued for strengthening entrepreneurship and enterprises engaged in developing innovative solutions benefiting the poorest Filipinos. A number of our cultural agencies have also received increases, including the National Museum, the Philippine High School for the Arts, the National Library of the Philippines, the National Archives of the Philippines, the Cultural Center of the Philippines, the Film Development Council of the Philippines, and the Design Center of the Philippines. Meanwhile, the augmented budget of the Philippine Sports Commission will be used for support for our athletes for training, workshops, competition programs, and the construction of training institutes. Other agencies that will receive added budget include the Congress of the Philippines to cover additional operating requirements, the commission and appointments, as well as for the construction of the new Senate building. The Office of the Vice President, the Department of Finance for the IT infrastructure of the BIR and BOC, Bureau of Internal Revenue and Bureau of Customs, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Foreign Service Institute for funding our new foreign service posts and consular offices. The CDA, Cooperative Development Authority, the CIC, the Credit Information Corporation, and also receiving increases were the Development Academy of the Philippines, or DAP, the Philippine Center for Economic Development, PICED, the Southern Philippines Development Authority, SPDA, the National Dairy Authority, the Philippine Coconut Authority, the Energy Regulatory Commission, or ERC, and the Department of Energy. There were also necessary additions under our programmed appropriations, particularly for the Miscellaneous Personnel Benefits Fund, the Pension and Gratuity Fund, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas pursuant to its newly enacted charter, the NBI modernization program as moved by some of our colleagues. And before we end, Mr. President, we want to emphasize how the budget we are proposing for next year includes significant funding for the next round of salary increases of government employees, or the SSL 5, Salary Standardization Law 5, worth roughly 32 billion under the MPBF. This is in response to the clamor of our public school teachers and other government officials. Our President was adamant that we answer their pleas for better wages. This budget also has funding for the implementation of many of the laws that Congress has recently enacted and led by our colleagues in the chamber, like the Tulong Trabajo Act, the Innovation Act, the Rice Tarification Law, the Mental Health Law, the Judges at Large Law, the Gabaldon School Preservation Act, the Community-Based Monitoring System, or CBMS Act, the Four-Piece Act, which institutionalized the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. New laws as well, like the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, the Magna Carta for the Poor, the Seal of Good Local Governance, the law calling for mandatory PhilHealth coverage for persons with disabilities, and the law creating the DSUD were also provided funding in the 2020 budget, Mr. President. By assuring funding for the many pieces of legislation that our President has signed, we ensure that the administration's drive for change and for positive transformation shall echo for decades to come. These are the highlights of your committee's amendments to the proposed national budget. We'd like to thank profusely our vice chairs and our colleagues in the committee, and to thank especially the unsung heroes, the hardworking staff of the LBMRO, who worked late and long hours for almost a week, Mr. President, to complete this budget on time. Saludo po ako sa kanilang professionalism and work ethic. We'd also like to thank the Senate leadership and the minority for their efforts to come up with a better budget. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we approve the... Mr. President, I move that we close the period of amendments, the committee amendments. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments closed.
Mr. President, move to approve, I move to open the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of individual amendments open.
Mr. President, no member registered to provide individual amendments. Move to close the period of individual amendments.
Hearing no objection, period of individual amendments closed.
Mr. President, with
Besides,
that-
the individual amendments were already manifested by
Inputted.
the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President, I move that we vote on second reading House Bill number 4228 as amended.
Nasa landback na.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill 4228 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, this being a certified measure, I would like to request the Secretary to read the letter certification to the President. So we can take
Secretary will
second
read
reading.
the certification from the President.
Senate President Vicente Soto III, Senate President. Mr. Senate President, pursuant to the provisions of Article 6, Section 26, Subparagraph 2 of the 1987 Constitution, I hereby certify to the necessity of the immediate enactment of House Bill Number 4228, entitled An Act Appropriating Funds for the Operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2020, and for other purposes, in order to address the need to maintain continuous government operations following the end of the current fiscal year, to expedite the funding of various programs, projects, and activities for fiscal year 2020, and to ensure budgetary preparedness that will enable the government to effectively perform its constitutional mandate. Best regards, very truly yours, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that certification, we can do away with the 3-day requirement of the Constitution. I move that we vote on third reading of House Bill Number 4228. Ask the Secretary to read the title and proceed with the roll call.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure and conduct a roll call vote.
House Bill Number 4228, an act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2020, and for other purposes. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri. Senate President Soto III.
With 22 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstention, House Bill 4228 is approved on third reading.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I believe Senator Bongo would like to deliver an explanation of his vote on the budget.
You may submit. Do you want to submit your explanation of your vote?
I think he prepared, Mr. President. Yes, I'm prepared.
So he wants to read it. All right, Senator Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, I would like to put on record that I voted in the affirmative, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the chairman of the Committee on Finance and this body for adopting the much-needed increase in the health budget. Public health should be one of our priorities. As chairman of the Committee on Health, I commend this chamber for approving the additional 7 billion for the Human Resources for Health Deployment Program. This is to ensure the continued employment of our health workers and allow DOH to augment, redistribute, and retain health workers in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas and economically disadvantaged municipalities. Wala pong mawawala ng trabaho, tuloy-tuloy po ang serbisyo. Mr. President, I also want to commend the Committee on Finance and our distinguished guests, colleagues, for taking measures that would allow us to implement the Supreme Court decision upholding the validity of Section 32 of the Philippine Nursing Act of 2002, which provides that the minimum base pay of nurses working in the public health institutions shall not be lower than salary grade 15. This is a long overdue compensation denied to them. Hindi na natin sila paghintayin pa, Mr. President. Magkakaroon na sila ng increase sa kanilang sweldo as soon as January of next year. Lastly, I laud the increase in the budget of PhilHealth that would enable us to progressively realize universal health care in the country and ensure that all Filipinos are guaranteed equitable access to quality and affordable health care. Again, I ask the DOH, PhilHealth, and all our government agencies to ensure judicious and prudent use of public funds. I trust our agencies will institute reforms to improve efficiency in spending their budgets. Let me also congratulate both houses of Congress for the swift passage of this appropriation measure. I call on my colleagues to ensure smooth deliberations during the bicameral conference proceedings in order to avoid a reenacted budget and ensure the continuous delivery of the most basic services to our fellow Filipinos. Let us work double time to finish the process just in time for the President's signature for the benefit of our countrymen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Gordon?
Mr. President, just a short manifestation. I would like to congratulate the Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Angara, worthy son to a great father. Certainly, I'm sure his father is very proud of him today because this is first crack at shepherding the budget. And it is important, I'm sure, that we try to send the message in heaven. I also want to take the opportunity, Mr. President, that this Senate has not been sleeping on the job, Mr. President, in the sense that for a long, long time, the nurses in this country had been clamoring for, the adjustment of their salaries, and it took the Supreme Court to come out with a decision that says we can no longer hold it back. This representation has been meeting with nurses. I've run hospitals in the past. I've run nurses in the Red Cross, Mr. President, and they have always talked to us about how badly they're discriminated at. And many a time, the discrimination applies in the sense that they are given jobs at low pay with no benefits, and at the same time, the hospitals, not all of them, but some hospitals take advantage of their situation so that they can get a certification that they have served in a hospital so they can go abroad. Our nurses should not go abroad. There are many, many rural health units, Mr. President, that don't have nurses, that have adequate medical assistance. Many a time and off, you have heard this representation say na 6 out of 10 Filipinos die without ever seeing a doctor. Well, perhaps now nurses would be adequate to help at least for the time being until we can bring doctors to the fore in the rural areas. The increase of nurses of basic salary has been approved by the Senate through a 3.173 billion fund that will convert nurses from nurse 1 to nurse 2. I congratulate the Senate, Mr. President. All of us here deserve a pat on the back because we took heart and compassion with our nurses in this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Minority Leader wanted to also to explain or to manifest, but he changed his mind.
Thank you.
He changed his mind, Mr. President.
A debt of gratitude to Senator Dino.
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that congratulations are in order to the gentleman from Aurora. Job well done to our chairman of the Committee on Finance. And Mr. President, with the permission of the body, this is I move that we proceed to the Senate President's designation of the Senate conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing votes on House Bill number 4228. These are members of the BICAM, Mr. President. I know this will be very difficult for you, Mr. President, because I believe everyone wants to be a member of the BICAM. Unfortunately, the House has only how many members? The House has only, Congress. 13.
13.
There are 13 members of the House
Well,
BICAM panel, and the
I'm-
Senate wishes to be 17 members.
I'm looking at the possibility of designating at least 15.
15.
At least 15.
Yes,
All
Mr.
right?
President.
So,
Your decision.
with the permission of the chamber, I designate the chairperson of the Bicameral Conference Committee to be Senator Sani Angara, and vice chairpersons would be Lacson, Villar, Cayetano, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Marcos, Villanueva, and members Recto, Binay, Po, Drilon, Pangilinan, Hontiveros. 15.
So,
Be sure you attend.
Mr. President, this is history in the making. We have bicameral conference members that are more than the House of Representatives, Mr. President. But that's good
First time
because
in the history.
I think the first in history. But that's also because we have a number of vice chairmen, Mr. President.
Yes.
We have, I believe, 9 or 8 vice chairmen.
Anyway,
Committee on
as
Finance.
enumerated
9
by
members.
the presiding officer, the senators are hereby designated.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the minority leader changed his mind. He has a quick manifestation to make.
Senator Frank Drilon, the minority leader, is recognized.
Yes, a little late, but I wish to place of record my appreciation for the work done by the chairman of the Committee on Finance and also to Senator Dick Gordon. He allowed us, this chamber, to terminate the period of interpellation and allow us to finish the budget. He did that by watching the basketball game, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. We're highly appreciative
Huwag ka na
of this.
sasagot. Huwag ka na.
Mr. President,
Tama na. Oh.
Senator Dillon and I come from the UP Law School.
Aha.
And if we would be allowed some exaggeration, we belong to the University of Law College of the Philippines. Hindi nakuha ng UST, Mr. President. But you know, we came out, we went to the game, and I think that humanized the Senate because we are not all work here. Once in a while, we have to show our allegiance to our alma mater. Just as Senator Dillon always pays allegiance to his fraternity, Sigma Rho, who counts on stellar fraternity members like Sal Panelo, and of course, we have our own in the Upsilon, and this is what makes for a happy Senate, Mr.
Oh,
President.
yes.
All the better. So, Mr. President, I would like to congratulate also the discipline of our Senate President, who refused to leave and vacate his position so that he could go to the Letran game.
Oh.
Both of us come from Letran, Mr. President. I come for 4 years of Letran, and I think he went there for several high school and college. But nonetheless, Mr. President, this shows that we are human beings capable of growth and laughter, and no bickering and looking at the national interest, including the discipline that we must have so that we will win in the Asian Games. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you. I know for a fact that you and Senator Drilon and some others come from the best law school in Quezon City.
Yes, Mr. President.
Because
But I'd like to put on-
there are others who come from the best law school in Makati.
Yes, Mr. President. But, Mr. President, we'd like to put on record also that the tremendous work done by the chair, the vice chair, Senator Gordon, in sponsoring his departments. Because that time, there were 2 departments, Department of Tourism and Department of PCOO. No one wished to interpolate him. But he interpreted it. But he sponsored it quickly, Mr. President, with no interpolation. That's how much respect we have to the gentleman from Zambales. Mr. President,
All right.
moving forward, Mr. President, we did work very hard, 2 weeks of work, 13-hour days. We thank everybody for their support, and the staff, especially the Secretariat, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 643 under Committee Report number 13. This is an act granting night differential pay to government employees. May we recognize Senator Bong Revilla, Mr. President.
All right, hearing no objection, consideration of Senate Bill 643 is in order. Senator Bong Revilla is recognized.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
President, we're in the period of, just a status, Mr. President, we're in the period of amendments. I move for the open the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of amendments is open. Senator Revilla, you are recognized. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 1, line 5, after the word between, delete the phrase 10 o'clock in the morning, and in lieu thereof, insert the phrase the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. of the following day. The first paragraph of Section 1 of the bill shall now read, Section 1, government employees, including those in government-owned or controlled corporations, whether their nature of employment is permanent, contractual, temporary, or casual, shall be paid night shift differential at a rate not exceeding 20% of the hourly basic rate of the employee for each hour of work performed between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. of the following day, provided that the night shift differential pay provided under this act shall be in addition to and shall not in any way diminish whatever benefits and allowances being presently enjoyed by government employees. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On the same page, line 16, delete the word "n" and insert a new paragraph that will read, B, government employees whose schedule of office hours fall between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Services rendered beyond the regular 8-hour work schedules are paid overtime pay in accordance with existing laws, rules, and regulations, N. So moved, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, amendment is adopted.
On page 2, line 14, delete the phrase "from savings generated from the different and in lieu thereof insert against existing appropriations for the purpose of." So moved, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, adopted. Would you like to re-letter letter B to letter C on line 1, page 2?
Yes, Mr. President.
All right, so re-lettered.
On the same page, line 15, after the word agencies, insert the word concerned.
Agencies
With this
concerned.
amendment, section 4A shall now read, A, for the national government entities, the initial amount shall be charged against existing appropriations for the purpose of departments, bureaus, offices, and agencies concerned.
Period.
Period.
Agencies concerned, period. Any
There are-
objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted.
I'm not just,
Huh? Are
okay.
you changing something there? No. That's okay.
Okay. Renumber the subsections accordingly. So moved, Mr. President.
All right, and we so renumber.
No more committee amendments, Mr. President.
All right, the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we close the period of committee amendments and open the period of individual amendments.
Period of individual amendments open.
In consideration of the concern raised by the minority leader during the period of interpellations, the following individual amendments are manifested, Mr. President. On page 1, line 1, after the words government employees, insert the phrase under salary grade 1 to salary grade 24. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 1, line 4, after the word employee, insert the phrase as determined by the head of the agency. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
With these amendments, the first paragraph of Section 1 of the bill shall now read, Section 1, government employees under salary grade 1 to salary grade 24, including those in government-owned or controlled corporations, whether in their nature of employment is permanent, contractual, temporary, or casual, shall be paid night shift differential at a rate not exceeding 20% of the hourly basic rate of the employee, as determined by the head of the agency, for each hour of work performed between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. of the following day, provided that the night shift differential pay provided under this act shall be in addition to and shall not in any way diminish whatever benefits and allowances being presently enjoyed by the government employees. So moved, Mr. President.
Oh, yes, adopted.
On page 1, line 11, insert the word basic before monthly. So moved, Mr. President.
Hearing no objection, adopted.
On page 1, line 15, delete the phrase A, public health workers who are already covered by Republic Act number 7305. So move, Mr. President.
You are removing them from the... all right, any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 2, line 3, before the word national, delete the letter S from the word Philippines. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 2, line 4, after the acronym BJMP, delete the conjunction N. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
On page 2, line 5, after the acronym BFP, in open and close parentheses, insert a comma and the following phrase, and the other similarly situated as may be determined by the Civil Service Commission and the Department of Budget and Management. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
With this amendment, subsection B of section 2 shall now read, B, government employees whose services are required or are on call 24 hours a day, such as uniformed personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, and the Philippine National Police, PNP, the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, BJMP, the Bureau of Fire Protection, BFP, and others similarly situated as may be determined by the Civil Service Commission and the Department of Management and Department of Budget and Management. So move, Mr. President.
All right, anyway, the amendment is adopted. Now, you will just have to re-letter again, because
That's-
you removed
Yes,
letter A.
renumber the subsections accordingly.
All right,
Mr.
any
President.
objection? Adopted.
That's all, Mr. President.
All right.
Thank
Majority
you.
Leader, any other individual amendment?
Mr. President, there being no members who wish to propose any amendments, I move to close the period of amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of individual amendments closed.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 643. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill 643 is approved on second reading.
Move to suspend consideration of the measure.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Congratulations, Bong. Bong. Congrats. Congratulations in order to the chairperson, Senator Bong Revilla. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1055. That's an act establishing separate facility for prisoners convicted of heinous crimes, Mr. President. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of 1055 is in order.
Mr. President, we are in the period of amendments. May we recognize our minority floor leader? Oh, my apologies, Mr. President. I'd like to recognize the sponsor, Senator Gordon, to sponsor the measure and to propose for committee amendments, Mr. President. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, period of committee amendments is open.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have the honor to introduce some committee amendments on SBN 1055 and CRN 5, Separate Facility for Heinous Crimes Inmates Act, and these are the proposed amendments. Number 1, on page 1, line 3, after the Roman numeral number 2, insert the words quotes of the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines, comma, close quotes. I submit, Your Honor.
May I have a 1 minute suspension?
Good.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senate President is recognized.
Yes, before the break, or before the suspension, Senator Gordon, the principal sponsor of the measure, was introducing an amendment. Technically, it is an individual amendment because it's a substitute bill, so therefore we're in the period of individual amendments. Now, the amendment that he was proposing would be practically the same line of my amendment. So if I may be allowed, may I propose to the sponsor, the same. On the page 1, delete the body of section 2, the declaration of policy, from lines 3 to 7, and replace it with the following. It is the policy of the state to promote the general welfare and safeguard the basic rights of every prisoner incarcerated in the National Penitentiary. Furthermore, the state adheres to the basic principle that the different categories of prisoners shall be kept in separate institutions or parts of institutions, taking account of their sex, age, criminal record, the legal reason for their detention, and the necessities of their treatment. With this, we no longer need to state that particular provision in the Constitution, if the sponsor will accept.
We just use a slight amendment. I don't know if the gentleman will accept, this Honorable Senate President. Instead of sex, we just say gender, Mr. President.
Account of their gender.
Because sometimes, I know people who, when they're asked while they're arriving in the Philippines, when they're asked sex, they say 3 times a day.
Yes, it becomes a joke, indeed. But the problem is that gender is a... Ano tawag doon sa sex? Gender is a subclass of sex.
Sorry?
It's a subclass of sex.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I would rather that we say sex instead of gender.
I will yield to the wisdom of the...
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Is there-
Your Honor.
The sponsor yields. Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
If the distinguished sponsor has no other amendment on page 1, I have a page 2, line 9, unless he has an anterior amendment. The minority leader, Mr. President.
The minority leader is recognized.
I have an amendment on page 2, line 4. Is that an anterior amendment?
Yes. As far as I'm concerned, it's an anterior amendment. I don't know about the sponsor. Mine is on line 9.
Yes, so we have a proposed amendment on
Sponsor?
line 4.
The sponsor, will you accept an amendment from the minority leader?
Of course, Your Honor.
Minority leader, please proceed with your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. During the period of interpellation, we proposed a definition of the national inmate should be consistent with Republic Act 10575 or the Bureau of Corrections Act of 2013 for purposes of uniformity. The good sponsor agreed with that observation during our interpellation, and therefore we propose to amend on page 2, line 4, on the definition of national inmate to read as follows. Letter B, inmates shall refer to an inmate sentenced by a court to serve a term of imprisonment for more than 3 years or a fine of more than 1,000 pesos, or regardless of the length of sentence imposed by the court, to one sentence for violation of customs law and other laws within the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Customs or enforceable by it, semicolon, or for violation of the immigration and election law, semicolon, or to one sentenced to serve 2 or more prison sentences in the aggregate exceeding the period of 3 years, comma, whether or not he has appealed. period, it shall also include a person committed to the Bureau of Prisons by a court or competent authority for temporary confinement for similar purpose. To emphasize, this is the definition under Republic Act 10575, which we are incorporating also to the proposed measure. We submit, Mr. President.
We accept, Your Honor.
What does the sponsor say?
We accept, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then, if the distinguished sponsor has no anterior amendment, may I propose an amendment on line 9 of the same page, page 2.
Senate President, please
Line
proceed.
9. Thank you. I propose to insert a new section, Your Honor, section 4, to read as creation of heinous crimes facility. There shall be established and maintained a secured, clean, adequately equipped, and sanitary national penitentiary for the custody and safekeeping of offenders convicted of heinous crimes under the operation of the Bureau of Corrections. Period. The rationale of this, Mr. President, is that so that the bill will be clearer as regards its primary purpose. So if the distinguished sponsor will accept, Mr. President.
Of course, Your Honor, we will accept that.
The sponsors accepted. Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Then, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
yes,
just a
yes.
moment. We have further amendments so that we don't surpass ourselves
All right.
right away. That
The
is on
sponsors
lines,
recognize it.
page 2, we delete lines 2 to 3 and replace it with high-level offenders, offenders convicted of heinous crimes and are convicted of reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment shall be considered as high-level offenders. Period. Heinous crimes are those crimes which are heinous for being grievous, odious, and hateful offenses, and which by reason of their inherent or manifest wickedness, viciousness, atrocity, and perversity are repugnant and outrageous to the common standards and norms of decency and morality in a just, civilized, and orderly society. Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, may I now continue for, still for, I propose that Section 7 be renumbered as Section 5. This is just to, the provisions will be orderly and coherent, Mr. President. So, and then may I proceed with page 2, lines 10 to 13. I move to delete lines 10 to 13 and replace it with the following. The transfer of inmates shall be headed by the Bucor. The Bucor may seek the assistance of the Department of Interior and Local Government, DILG, through the Philippine National Police, PNP, when the means of transporting the inmates will be done through the use of an aircraft or vessel. The expenses in relation to the said transfer shall be charged against the budget of the Bucor. Next paragraph. During the transfer of inmates from the prison facilities of the Bucor to the heinous crimes facilities, they shall be exposed to public view as little as possible, and proper safeguards shall be adopted to protect them from insult, curiosity, and publicity in any form. Moreover, any inconvenience or unnecessary physical hardships on the inmates while they are being transferred shall be prohibited. Separate vehicles should be used for male and female prisoners. When the transfer has been fully executed, a report jointly prepared by the PNP and the Bucor shall be submitted to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The rationale, Mr. President, is this is being proposed to ensure that there will be an orderly conduct of transfer of inmates from their current penal facilities to the heinous crimes facilities. Mr. President, if this distinguished sponsor will accept.
We accept, Your Honor, except that we'd like to add at the last paragraph, after the House of Representatives, a paragraph that says, provided that women inmates and minors between 15 and 17 years of age shall be transferred and kept in a separate building inside the heinous crime facility, Your Honor.
We can include that, the paragraph after, separate vehicles should be used for male and female prisoners. I accept the amendment of the amendment, Mr. President.
Yes, Your Honor. So that makes it be placed right after,
After the third, before the last paragraph.
yes, Your Honor. Yes,
Before the last paragraph.
yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is-
Thank you, Your Honor.
So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you. We have no more amendments on page 2. We have on page 3, unless the sponsor has on page 2. The minority
Yes.
leader, yes. The sponsor first.
The minority leaders recognized.
Still on page
The-
2,
Page 2.
still on page 2, just as a matter of style and on page 2, line 6, we believe we can remove the D on the word secured. It should be secure and isolated place instead of secured. Remove the D in the word secured.
We accept, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then, a matter of style again, the phrase on line 6, which says, "one far away from," be deleted, and in lieu thereof, insert the following phrase, "shall refer to a safe and remote place that has minimal contact with."
Civilian communities.
Can I repeat it? Delete
Yes.
the phrase on line 6, "one far away from." In lieu thereof, insert the following, "shall refer to a safe and remote place that has minimal contact with." So the line 6 to 8 will now read as follows: secure and isolated place. Refer to a safe and remote place that has minimal contact with civilian communities that will ensure the safety and security of the former and prevent the facility from possible intrusion or intruders.
We accept, Your Honor. I'm glad that the preposition from was changed to with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
So,
I have an amendment on page 2, Your Honor.
page 2,
If
yes.
I may be permitted. On page 2, line 16, on location of the maximum penal institution, I would like to make an omnibus motion to replace the term maximum penal institution with heinous crimes facility. Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then again, on page 2, line 21, instead of the word institution, I move to replace it with facilities, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
We're now on page 3, Your Honor.
Page 3. We have a proposal on page 3, Mr. President, line 14, unless you have an anterior amendment. Line 14, insert a new provision to read as follows. Conduct of random drug testing. There shall be conducted a regular random drug testing among the inmates in the heinous crimes facility. The random drug testing shall be done by any forensic laboratories, not by any laboratory, or by any of the drug testing laboratories accredited and monitored by the Department of Health, DOH, to safeguard the quality of test results. And a renumbering of the sections, Mr. President. This is to ensure that the inmates and the facility itself remain to be drug-free at all times.
That's excellent, Your Honor. We accept it. However, I have an interior amendment before that, if I
Oh.
may. I'm sorry, you went right ahead. But,
I'm sorry.
I can always go back, Mr. President. And that is on
Yeah,
page...
will you accept this proposal?
Yes, Your Honor, I will accept
Is
it.
there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Anterior amendment by the sponsor, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Please
Yes, on
proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, if I may. On page 3, line 6, insert after the last sentence ending in maintained, the sentence, due regard shall be given to the mental health issues and needs of inmates. Prisoners shall have access to necessary healthcare services without discrimination on the grounds of their legal status, Your Honor.
Is there any
So
objection?
you submit.
There being none, motion is approved.
And then on page 3, insert a new section 7, which would read as follows. Visitation. Family and immediate relatives are allowed to visit the inmates subject to further rules and regulations imposed.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then on page 3, line 9, delete the phrase, comma, which is conducted, and insert which is conducted.
Remove which is conducted.
Remove, delete the phrase, which is conducted, Your Honor.
So it will read an internal inspection by the prison administration. All right.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then on page 3, line 10, delete the phrase, which is conducted again.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
So that the section on conduct of inspection shall now read as follows, colon, an internal inspection by the prison administration and an external inspection by the Department of Justice shall be conducted on a regular basis to ensure that the facility is administered in accordance with existing laws and regulations and to bring about the attainment of the objectives of the penal system. So move, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And then on page 3, delete the lines 14 to 19 and insert a new section to read as follows. Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on Separate Facility for Heinous Crimes Inmates Act. This is an amendment really by our Majority Floor Leader, Mick Subiri. There is hereby created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee composed of the Chairman of the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights and the Chairman of the House Committee on Justice with 4 members each from both houses. The said members shall be duly appointed by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives from the members of the respective committee based on the proportional representation of the parties or coalition therein. The Joint Oversight Committee shall review and approve the implementing rules and regulations of this act and monitor its proper implementation.
Is there a minority leader?
Just a point of clarification. We haven't reviewed the jurisprudence, but is Congress, through its oversight function, allowed to approve the rules and regulations issued so that without the approval of Congress, such rules and regulations cannot be promulgated? Just a query, Mr. President, because I do recall some jurisprudence on this, but I could not recall exactly how the Supreme Court ruled.
That is Mr. President, that is also my understanding. We might not be able to incorporate here that the implementing rules and regulations shall be approved by Congress. The oversight, just the oversight function, yes.
This is just the oversight functions, Your Honor, because the principal sponsor of this amendment, Senator Subiri, was smarting from what happened in the BCDA law. GCTA, I'm sorry. Force of habit, Your Honor. GCTA law where the IRR did not reflect the intentions of the law, Your Honor.
May we hear again the proposed amendment of the gentleman from Zambales? Mr.
Again,
President?
it refers to the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on Separate Facility, on Separate for Heinous Crimes Inmates Act. Maybe we should change that. There is hereby created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee composed of the Chairman of the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights and the Chairman of the House Committee on Justice with 4 members each from both houses. The said members shall be duly appointed by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. Representatives from the members of the respective committee based on the proportional representation of the parties or coalition therein. The Joint Oversight Committee shall review and approve the implementing rules and regulations of this act.
Perhaps, Mr. President, we may put a period after therein and not include the last line. If the kind sir from Zambales will agree.
As a proponent, Mr. President, of the amendment, I would agree with the Senate President. I think that's an executive function, the approval of the implementing rules and regulations. So we're willing to just have an oversight function,
Yeah.
oversight body to see implementation of the measure, of the whole law.
Period after therein.
Yes, sir. In which case, you remove and approve the implementing rules and regulations of this act, but retain and monitor its proper implementation. Would that
Yun.
be Yeah.
Monitor.
its proper implementation?
Pwede, pwede.
Pwede yan. Oh.
Aha, aha.
Thank you, Your Honor. If that, there's no objection.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
We have an amendment on line 20.
Yes, Your Honor, go ahead.
Alright. Line 20, to insert a new provision to read as follows. Information technology systems. The Bucor shall make sure that there will be an effective and efficient information technology systems to be used in the build-up, maintenance, and transmittal of necessary inmate records to all the prison and penal farms of the Bucor and other authorized government agencies, period.
We accept, Your Honor. There's also our amendment, Your Honor.
Oh, very good.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
We have no more on page 4.
Neither
Page 3.
have we. I don't know if the minority floor leader has one on page 3, Your Honor.
Nothing more on page 3.
Okay. I just want to make sure our dear minority floor leader has no more amendments to that on page 3. None? All right. On page 4, line 1, insert a new provision to read as follows, if I may. Or I'd rather give it to the Senate President.
No, good. You're the main sponsor.
Implementing rules and regulations. The Secretary of Justice shall promulgate the implementing rules and regulations of this act within 90 days upon its effectivity. And then reportorial requirements. The Bucor shall submit a biannual report to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives starting from the commencement of the construction of the heinous crimes facility until its completion. Prior to the completion of the construction of the heinous crimes facility, the report shall include the progress of the construction and the information on the application of the budget in relation to the aforesaid construction. When the premises of the heinous crime facility has been completed and occupied by the higher level drug offenders, the report on the status of the implementation of this act shall be submitted annually. Let the subsections be renumbered accordingly.
We submit to the cerebral prowess of the gentleman from Zambales, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know about
Is there
cerebral.
any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
All right.
No more amendments?
No more. The last paragraph
We have
you
no more
read
amendments, Your Honor.
was similar to the proposed bill that I presented to your committee. So,
Yes, Your Honor. We
very good. Thank you very
make
much,
sure that
Mr.
we
President.
include all that.
The majority leader.
Mr. President, may we recognize the minority?
The minority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, may we tarry a little with the permission of this of our good friend, the Senate President. I just want to when the premises. Let me just read the paragraph concerned on repertorial requirements. The last sentence. I'd like to take the advice of everyone here. When the premises of the heinous crimes facility has been completed and occupied by the high-level drug offenders, Mr. President, I think we should include, just say high-level offenders, Mr. President, and no drug offenders. Sama na lahat. Because lumalabas may drug offenders. So remove the word drug from that line and just say by the high-level offenders.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have no more committee amendments, Mr. President.
Majority leader.
With that, there being no more committee and individual amendments, I move to close the period of amendments on Senate Bill number 1055.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1055. I so move, subject to style and amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to suspend consideration of the same.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues.
Congratulations. Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
Okay, congratulations. Congratulations to our Senate President Vicente Soto, the principal author, and of course Senator Gordon, and myself as one of the authors. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the minority also for supporting this. So, Mr. President, we have a few more items on the agenda, particularly on the bill of Senator Bato. Is Senator Bato de la Rosa around? May we ask for? Ano number? Yes, but Senator Grace has to be here. Is she here? She has, fine, I cannot. May I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Let's have a few minutes break lang daw muna. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1155. I so move.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
This happens to be our measure, Mr. President Pro Tem. This is the validity, act fixing the validity period of license to own and possess permit to carry firearms outside of the residence, as well as the registration of firearms. Mr. President, I move that we recognize the distinguished sponsor, Senator Bato de la Rosa, Mr. President.
The former chief PNP and the sponsor of this measure, Senator Bato de la Rosa, is recognized.
Bill namin tong tatlo. Mabilis to.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, no member wishes to interpolate the measure. I think it's a very simple measure. We're just going to extend the LTOP from 2 years to 5 years and registration of firearms from 4 years to 5 years. And then synchronized to your date of birth. I think that will simplify all the renewal of firearms licenses, Mr. President.
And I suppose one of the reasons why there are no interpolators is that the sponsor of this measure wrote a very good bill.
That's correct.
I congratulate the sponsor of the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, and
There-
you also being the author, Mr. President, and myself, together with Senator Bato de la
The
Rosa.
three best looking in the Senate
Absolutely.
collaborated. Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, move to open the period of amendments and request a sponsor if there are any amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. Sponsor is recognized. Is there any amendments?
No amendment, Mr. President.
That's how good the bill is written.
It's very good, Mr. President.
Majority
No
Leader.
need of amendments. Mr. President, I move that we close the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, with that, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1155.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. Congratulations to Senator Bato de la Rosa. One step away from passing on third reading this landmark legislation.
Congratulations also, Mr. President, and Majority Leader for that bill.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I
President.
move to suspend consideration of the measure.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number, yes.
1 minute, session suspended.
Session.
1 minute. No, just congratulate lang. Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1077.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
This is an act creating the National Transportation Safety Board, describing its powers, functions, appropriating funds, therefore. May we recognize, Mr. President, the distinguished sponsor, Senator Grace Poe.
Senator Grace is recognized.
Mr. President, no member listed to interpolate the measure. I also took this up with the Minority Floor Leader. He's okay with the measure. I move that we close the period of interpolation.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, may I ask for 1 minute suspension?
Session suspended for a minute.
National Transport Safety Board. Wala kang tiwala.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we recognize the sponsor for any amendments, Mr. President, the period of amendments.
We have no amendments, Mr. President.
That is how good this bill is also, Mr. President.
That is correct.
You just
With
had
the
to share the
gentle
compliment.
lady senator
We had no doubt, Mr. President.
Pangasinan and Iloilo and the Republic of the Philippines.
No, I think he was doubting me initially, Mr. President. Just had to reaffirm.
Absolutely not. I know the lady senator is one of the best. Mr. President, with that, Move to close the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1077.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Congratulations to the sponsor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
Congratulations.
President. Thank you.
May we move to suspend consideration of the same.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
You want to wait for the SB for this? Election to the oversight committees. Mr. President, by request of Senator Wing Gatchalian, Chairperson of the Senate Committee of Energy, I move that House Bill number 4436, the Llano del Norte Electric Cooperative, and House Bill number 4437, the Bicol Light and Power Corporation, be referred secondarily to the Committee on Energy. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President,
Congratulations.
I move to resume consideration, Mr. President, of Senate Bill number 1074.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is our sin tax, or the excise tax on alcohol and heated tobacco, to sponsor once again Senator Pia Cayetano, and to interpolate the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, Senator Francis Tol Tolentino.
Senator Pia is recognized to sponsor the measure. To interpolate, Senator Tolentino is recognized.
President, will the good sponsor yield to some questions?
Yes, Mr. President, very willingly.
Understand the records would show that this is just a
Continuing.
continuation of my previous interpellation, which, if I'm not mistaken, took us more than an hour a few months ago. A few months ago, before
What seems like a few months ago. Maybe 6 weeks ago?
6 weeks ago, before the incident involving a 16-year-old girl from Cebu who was confined in an ICU in Cebu because of vaping. And it came out in the news last week. Unfortunately, Mr. President, and then for the information of the good sponsor, that girl was supposed to be here. That girl was supposed to be here, but we had a hard time tracking her from her hometown because she moved to another place, perhaps nearer to a hospital in Mandaue, Mr. President. So that's the first case of a vaping incident, perhaps involving respiratory illness, Mr. President.
Actually, I would even say first documented.
First documented.
First documented.
I have a few questions, though, Mr. President. And perhaps with the assistance of some personnel from the Department of Finance, this can be elucidated by the good sponsor. My first question, and perhaps relative to other items contained in the bill, my real question is, can you tax something that is illegal? Can you tax something that is illegal, Mr. President?
I remember, Mr. President, we initially touched on this in your last interpellation. I think we started it and then, or were we just discussing it off the record? Now I'm not sure. But in any case, we started looking at that, and the tax code is general enough that
Section 129 of the NIRC states that excise taxes apply for goods manufactured or produced in the Philippines for domestic sales or consumption or any other disposition, and to things imported as well as services performed in the Philippines. So considering that if a product therefore is manufactured or produced or imported, then they can be taxed. They can be subject of excise tax. There is no exception, or there's no distinction whether it is prohibited or not.
I agree, Mr. President. The good sponsor is correct because there are accepted principles. In fact, there are 4 canons of taxation. And if I may repeat this,
Please.
as part of the records, equity, the amount payable by the taxpayer should be equal, proportional to the income, ability, based on the ability to pay, convenience, and I'm referring to administrative convenience, the mode of payment, and economy, and taxes should not be imposed if their cost of collection is excessive. But there is a principle, Mr. President, that should be part of the records and probably could guide the Committee on Ways and Means, and I will explain this later, because the perception of a lot of, thank you, uninformed or perhaps misinformed is that these e-cigarettes, these vapes, and other products are illegal. Therefore, if you pass a law taxing those products, it would perhaps somehow impose a mantle of legality.
Or the
so to speak.
presumption of legality.
Yes, because you're taxing it. So again, I pose the question, can you tax something illegal?
Well,
I-
please proceed.
And I have a short video presentation here dating back to, I forgot the year, the famous Al Capone. Al Capone's defense was that they can't collect legal taxes from illegal money. The Supreme Court of the United States, and I'm referring to the U.S. Supreme Court because even the good minority floor leader is aware that our National Internal Revenue Code was patterned after the Federal Internal Revenue Code. In fact, some provisions were lifted verbatim, word for word, including the section. So in 1931, Al Capone was imprisoned for tax evasion, though he claimed that they can't collect legal taxes from illegal money. Can I have this tape played?
Capone expanded the gang's activity.
Can you repeat that? Parang mahina. Something is wrong with our technical.
Boses ba ni Al Capone?
The Supreme Court of the U.S. Can we have this tax? Can we have this played? That was a joke.
Expanded the gang's activities to include prostitution and protection rackets. His downfall began when the Supreme Court ruled.
Can we continue that? Parang ayaw lumabas, Mr. President, that this is not related to the SEA Games technical team. Can we have that played again? That the video? That audio?
Capone expanded the gang's activities to include prostitution and protection rackets. His downfall began when the Supreme Court ruled that illegally earned income still needed to be declared for tax purposes.
That's it, Mr. President. So I was asking the good sponsor, can you tax something illegal? I heard Senator Lacson saying yes.
Well, Mr. President, every law student knows that the U.S. jurisprudence has persuasive effect in the Philippine courts. So it can be, if anybody ever questioned that, we can use your caricature, we can use, and obviously the legislative, the intention of the legislative body in passing the law. Let me backtrack. The legislative intent of the body is the most important piece of that puzzle, if it would be questioned. Because what was the legislative intent? First of all, as of now, the e-cigarette is not illegal. So if we are having this discussion and these debates in anticipation that it remains on the market and it remains legal, then we have no question. But if for whatever reason, at some point, there would be a declaration that it is illegal, then we have these debates on the floor to be used to show that it was the intention of Congress that these products would be taxable, based also on the NIRC that does not put any restrictions on that. And then further to that is the fact that the U.S. jurisprudence does have persuasive influence over, can be used by courts in the Philippines. That is also a settled practice, Mr. President.
Just out of curiosity, to the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, how did the U.S. government find the monies of Al Capone? If they were illegal, how did they know that he was not paying his taxes?
I think there were several witnesses who came out in the open, including his accountant, and a lot of other information came out. Of course, his non-filing of an income tax return led to his conviction.
So he did not file any income tax return for any
Yes. But the real intention then of the FBI was to go after him for that St. Valentine's Day massacre.
Yeah, the real thing there was that they wanted him off the streets.
Yes.
So in whatever way.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with the good sponsor that the persuasive effect would apply. But again, I posit this question. Saan po nakuha ng ating inagalang na sponsor na hindi illegal ang vape? When I heard in several discussions, there is no basis for its sale. There is no basis for its importation. I will cite the laws later on. And the only legal cover it has, perhaps, is a law passed a few years ago taxing vape. So I now go again to my first question, Mr. President. If it is legal, it can be taxed. If it is illegal, it can also be taxed. Is it correct, Mr. President?
Okay. Yeah. Mr. President, that's an interesting question, but my answer is simple. As far as taxation is concerned, there's a presumption that a product is legal and can be taxed. Therefore, unless there is any exemption made, it is taxable.
Yes, I now go again.
If I may just spread into the record that before His Honor and I became members of the Senate, the Congress passed a tax measure that included taxing e-cigarettes, Mr. President.
Yes.
So we're not introducing a new thing, just for the record.
Yeah, so even if the previous Congress opted to tax vapes, it doesn't mean that vapes are legal. Am I correct, Mr. President? Because, Mr. President,
Yes, I can respond to
Okay.
that. Mr. President, just because Congress chooses to tax vapes, it does not prevent the health authority or any other authority of the state within the exercise of its responsibility to ensure the safety of the Filipinos, to exercise its rights to regulate or to limit or to even ban a product.
I agree, Ms.
So in other words, they cannot use the fact that Congress has chosen to proceed with taxation as a basis to say that it is therefore
Legal.
safe or it is therefore a legal product.
I agree, Mr. President, because I'll now be positing a very important principle of taxation. It's the DOF family is listening. It is the principle of tax neutrality. Tax neutrality. What is the principle of tax neutrality? And I quote, taxes are not concerned with the legality or illegality of a transaction, but rather with the requirements for it to be taxed or not. So, ibig sabihin po, kung pinasa ng Kongreso, noong nakaraang Kongreso, kung minarapat na nakaraang Kongreso na i-tax ang vape, hindi po ibig sabihin na legal po iyong paggamit, pagpasok ng vape. Because according to the principle of tax neutrality, taxes are not concerned with the legality or illegality of a transaction. And I go on further, Mr. President. Our own National Internal Revenue Code imposes taxes in all income derived from whatever source, whether legal or illegal. So what I'm saying, Mr. President, is the mere fact that Congress, the 17th Congress, imposed a tax on e-cigarettes, it does not mean that e-cigarettes are now legal, Mr. President. Would the good sponsor agree to that proposition? And I'll be showing some video presentations.
Agree, Mr. President.
So at the moment, as we speak, as we debate on this, even if we approve, even if this Congress, if this chamber approves taxes, sin taxes on vapes, it does not clothe the vape products, e-cigarettes, with legality without the imprimatur that should be coming from the agency charged by law to give it legality. That is the Food and Drug Administration. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That is absolutely correct, Mr. President.
So hanggang ngayon po, hindi pa alam ng FDA kung ano yung gagawin. So, wala pa hong ginagawa ang FDA, Mr. President.
In fairness naman po sa FDA, may ginawa sila. Ang problema, tiniro po ito. They came out with an administrative order wherein they recognize the sale of the product, they recognize that the product is on the market, and they chose to regulate it both by supporting these tax measures or regulating it by way of taxation, but also regulating it by way of health regulations in terms of requiring that the products be registered so that they can monitor and play a stronger role in ensuring safety.
Agree, Mr. President, but belatedly. They opted to formulate the rules coming from that interagency committee after, I think that was the basis, Mr. President, that was the basis of that RTC judge for issuing the TRO, because it came not from the interagency committee, but from just the Secretary of Health. I may be corrected, but that's not my point. Going back to the principle of tax neutrality, we are now in agreement that the principle will call for imposition of taxes whether a product is legal or not. And regulation, do you agree, good sponsor? I'm sorry.
Actually, Mr. President, I'm just clarifying because of His Honor's statement that the initiative of FDA was in connection with the Interagency of Tobacco.
I stand corrected. Perhaps I
so
got...
that one, I just want to put that on
Yes.
record, that this was a sole initiative of FDA. In fact, Mr. President, I stand by my concern, my ongoing concern for how many years that interagency has not in any way exerted any effort to look into the health concerns, even though DOH is I'm not sure if it's a member or vice chair, but the chair is DTI, and they have not, and historically, I doubt if there has been any, I've not seen any initiative. That is precisely why I am happy and I express my support that FDA took the initiative on issuing that administrative order. Unfortunately, some members of the industry filed that TRO.
Mr. President?
Yes.
With the permission of our distinguished
Senator
colleagues
Lacson.
on the floor, baka hindi pa ako makatulog mamayang gabi because before we forget about Al Capone, I don't think the case of Al Capone is accurately analogous to the issue at hand. I think IRS taxed Al Capone's income, not any product or any goods that Al Capone was in possession of or whatever. But I may be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think IRS taxed Al Capone's income. In this case, what we are proposing to tax is vape, which is a product. It's just an observation, Mr. President.
I agree with the observation.
Thank you.
And I
Sir?
thank the gentleman for that observation
Yes.
as well.
I was just
I
giving.
still like the caricature though, so.
I was just giving some examples, and if I can go to some extremes, my other example would be something close to my occupation before, decolorum buses. Decolorum buses are illegal, but decolorum bus operators, they pay for the motor vehicles users charge, but that does not clothe that illegal bus operations legality insofar as LTFRB laws and other transport laws are concerned. They pay their income tax. They pay VAT for the gasoline that they get from the gasoline station. So, again, Mr. President, what I'm trying to stretch is that the mere fact that a product is illegal, the imposition of tax will not clothe it with legality.
And this representation totally agrees, Mr. President.
Because my concern, Mr. President, is at the moment, sans the regulations, sans the FDA approval, sans any law, vapes, insofar as existing Philippine laws are concerned, can still be considered as prohibited items. And in fact, I've cited before the Consumers Protection Act, and the good sponsor is familiar with this, Section 15. If it is banned in the place of manufacture, the Philippines should consider it as a prohibited imported product. So it can be apprehended in our customs area. It is a contraband, so to speak, Mr. President. So I now go to my, I think I still have a PowerPoint to show. Is the good sponsor aware of the new epidemic called EVALI? EVALI. A new disease. EVALI. A new disease.
That's the...
Identified by the World Health Organization, identified by the Center for Disease Communications, and even recognized now by the Department of Health. As I said, we now have a victim who is currently in Mandaue City, in Cebu, 16 years old. Hindi pa alam ng mga magulang nila kung anong gagawin kasi sila yung tinatago, palipat-lipat sila ng tirahan ngayon, Mr. President. We were able to track them yesterday, but apparently they changed residence again for treatment purposes. At marami sigurong media rin na humahabol sa kanya. So, is the good sponsor aware of EVALI and the effects of EVALI?
Well, Mr. President, EVALI is the acronym for e-cigarette or vaping product associated lung injury. So what I know is it's broad enough to cover injuries or ailments, conditions, medical conditions that are found to be associated with e-cigs and vaping.
So the the good sponsor is perhaps amenable to conclude, for the record, that there is now an epidemic brought about by the use of vapes, e-cigarettes, and other similar products, which necessitated the creation of a new nomenclature for a respiratory ailment, a valley, and perhaps in the near future, another ailment relative to cardiovascular diseases, Mr. President. I think you have some
Yes.
doctors.
Mr. President, it is accurate to say that there is an epidemic of EVALI, but this is a term, EVALI, this is a term that is used specific to a location. So in the US, I understand that such a declaration has been made because there is a large number of, there's a specific definition for you to be able to say it's an epidemic. And the US has made some kind of declaration to that effect because of the fact that there are many minors who are using the product. So in the Philippines, there has not been such a declaration yet.
If the good sponsor will recall, during the plenary budget deliberations, the good Secretary of Health admitted upon interpellation by this representation that they have issued a health advisory following a World Health Organization advisory that there is now a danger, I'm not familiar with the exact terminology, relative to the use of e-cigarettes, vapes, and other similar products. This emerging disease is now in the Philippines, and the Secretary of Health, Secretary Duque, took note of that and even affirmed that during the budget hearings for the Department of Health. I'm sure the good sponsor is aware of that. So there is no problem. I'm not contradicting the previous statement in terms of location, because when you speak of lungs, when you speak of cardiovascular conditions, we're all the same, whether you're from San Francisco, China, or Cebu. So I'm not sure what the good sponsor is saying in terms of location. Am I correct, Mr. President?
Okay. Mr. President, let me clarify that. The reason this representation said that there's not an epidemic here yet is because for you to use that term epidemic, there must be a certain number of persons affected within an immediate period of time. So that's why and that declaration of an epidemic would then trigger certain responses on the part not just of DOH but local government, etc., etc. So what His Honor referred to is actually a precautionary act done by DOH when there are indication that there is something new that every health professional, health institutions should be aware of and should immediately report so that there can be monitoring, because it is possible that there are
unreported.
many people affected, but it's unreported.
Yes.
A normal health consultation may not trigger asking those questions that would have otherwise given the health professional reason to conclude that this person has EVALI.
I agree, Mr. President. Perhaps we now question the surveillance mechanism or system of the Department of Health, which I likewise question, including their communication system, given the huge amount of budget given to them by Congress, more than 600 million, as per Senator Lacson during that deliberation. So perhaps some cases were unreported, similar to the polio incidents. When during the budget deliberation, Secretary Duque mentioned that there were just 3. The newspapers are now reporting more than 9. So perhaps the surveillance system of the DOH can be faulted for this, but I surmise that the health advisory coming from the DOH would mean that they are now taking cognizance of this use of vapes among the youth, and to take precaution is not just enough. Perhaps a step further, which they have yet to announce, but coming from the words of a certain Undersecretary Domingo, if I'm not mistaken, they're on the verge of banning, perhaps, or waiting for the right medical findings, conclusive perhaps, before they issue the correct advisory. Is that correct? The good from Mr. President?
Mr. President, the nature of a medical practitioner's education would bring this medical practitioner to advise that a product such as the e-vape, such as cigarettes, such as alcohol, should not be consumed. And so if you ask a health practitioner, most of them would really say, bawal sa'yo yan. So if you ask a health practitioner who happens to be a policymaker, and you mentioned the name of Yusek Domingo, I understand that his natural reaction would be to ban. But he also, this person, and again, I'm using him by way of example because that's the person you mentioned, also has to take into consideration what is the direction of the other agencies of government. And that's why if you ask DOH
Including
now,
the Department of Finance.
including the Department of Finance, because that's really how it is. I mean, there are a lot of products out there that if you ask health practitioner, they would say that should not be available to children, that should not be available to adults, but they are. So therefore, to be consistent with the position right now of the administration, the direction is highly regulating.
I agree, Mr. President, but for the information of the good sponsor, out of 181 countries, parties to the convention, a framework convention on tobacco control, out of 181 countries, including the Philippines, 104 countries still lack regulations concerning e-cigarettes. Hindi po tayo nag-iisa pala doon. 104 countries.
Actually, Mr. President, earlier I was going to spread into the records also that there are a lot of products that have not been directly banned, have not been declared legal either, but they're out there available, and some are regulated, some are not. And e-cigarettes has been one of those, continues to be one of those, but like us, like our country, there seems to be more awareness of the health risk, and therefore there is now a move to start considering what kind of regulation should be put into place. And that is why His Honor and I have both learned that different countries have decided to approach this issue differently. Some have opted for a direct ban, and others have opted for very serious regulations.
And perhaps the good sponsor would join me, perhaps, or the clamor of others that a good regulation perhaps would necessitate the banning of flavored e-cigarettes.
During the hearings, Mr. President, I think that was already a conclusion that, well, that your chairperson, I was just trying to look at my timeline, but that was around the time that it became quite clear to us that the flavors are really a problem. Actually, no, I correct myself, because if His Honor remembers, this representation actually shared a TED Talk by a behavioral scientist that was saying that because there are so many interesting flavors, and I included that statement in
It would
my
entice the youth.
sponsorship speech. It is really like enticing to the youth. It's like technology on a stick with all the things that you can do with this product. And that was partly, that was around the time that this representation realized that part of the regulation should be very strong regulations by way of flavors.
If I may ask the good sponsor, are you familiar with the vape party?
Yes, I am. In fact, I had a very sad incident because, not because I've been there.
Can I show?
I haven't been invited to one, but
Mr.
yes,
President,
please go ahead.
I have a short video presentation. Probably this vape party would
Let's
be
ask where he got
more visually realized if we see the video. Can we have the technical show this? General patronage. Can we have the vape?
Can we have the vape? Ano sabi mo?
Vape party video.
Kanina kasi, can we tax that?
This is a sample of a vape party. So you see the smoke emanating from, not from the stage, but from the various mouths. So is that the vape party referred to a while ago by the good sponsor?
Yeah, this one just created more smoke than the vape party I saw also on Instagram. But I'd like to share it with our colleagues.
Is
A lot- yes.
smoke or vapor?
Vapor.
Vapor.
Yeah, aerosol, vapor,
Aerosol.
aerosol. Yes. So I'd like to share with our colleagues that one of the Juul, one of the industry players, was actually brought to task by FDA, I believe, because of their marketing targeted to the youth. And that's why nauso yung vape party, because they would sponsor these kind of parties. So during our hearing, Juul representative volunteered that they will no longer, or at least in the Philippines, they will not be hosting, sponsoring, whatever, in any way, creating those kind of parties. But this is where my concern is. They've already set the tone. And so one day I open my Instagram and I see young people that I know, and that's also why my personal direction is to ban beyond the age of 18, because these are young people, they're still in school, but they're over 18. On their own, they create their Juul party, because it's there, it's on Instagram, you type it up, welcome to the Juul party. Sila, they create it because it's the in thing. It's the cool thing. So you don't even need these industry players to sponsor it. They've already created it in their mind na cool ito.
So the industry, Mr. President, the industry players would sponsor a vape party, give free vapes perhaps to the youth involved?
Or just, even if they don't give free vapes, the fact that they host the event, have a nice event there, pay for the DJ, that's already a sponsorship. They can say, I didn't pay for their vapes, I didn't give them free vapes, but you create that atmosphere. In fact, the scenario that I depicted, let me put on record, was not hosted. Well, at least I'm not aware that it was hosted. Pero for them, they already call it that. They already call it a Juul party. And that is my concern. Kahit na wala dun yung industry, yun na yung nasa mentality nila.
Again, Mr. President, nakita naman po natin yung sa usok pa lang, hindi naman po yun opening ng isang concert or ng Southeast Asian Games. Pero yung usok pa lang, makikita mo na sobra-sobra ng malanghap po yun ng ating mga kabataan. But I now go to the health effects, Mr. President. And these are validated, whether you have an FDA imprimatur or not, whether the DOH concurs with this. These are validated, Mr. President. I'd like to show on the screen some of the health effects. And this has really reached an epidemic proportion, Mr. President, especially in other countries. So can we have that? The slides. Next slide, please. The Senate yan eh. The other one. I think something is wrong with our technical again, Mr. President. So what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that even though we just have one confirmed victim coming from Cebu, perhaps the we have this here now. We have several credible academic medical journals, except from one source, Mr. President. Ang nagtatanggol lang po sa e-cigarette, kahit halughugin natin, is a medical group coming from UK, specifically London. But in the UK, Oxford University even debunked the claim of another hospital. I have here, Mr. President, and I'll perhaps, and the rules allow this, perhaps this can be part of the records. The European Society of Cardiology issued a medical, called this bulletin or paper that relative to the cardiovascular risk of electronic cigarettes. It is a preclinical and clinical studies. Very exhaustive, Mr. President, relative to electronic cigarettes, aerosol, nicotine, smoking, and toxicity. And with the permission of the good sponsor, I'd like this to be part of our records, Mr. President. This is too long, exhaustive to read, Mr. President. So it is now apparently very conclusive that the health effects, negative health effects, would be more than the benefits that what those who are saying that this can be a substitute for regular cigarettes, Mr. President. And I think the good sponsor who was with me in Geneva for that World Health Organization conference would agree with me.
Sorry, I'm sorry. What was that
Naniniwala
question?
po ba kayo na sa dami na po nitong lumalabas na medical bulletins, documented cases, talagang dapat matigil. Kung iisa-isahin ko po ito, napakarami po nito, Mr. President, clinically validated and proven by science. So we need not expound on the negative effects of e-cigarettes or vapes. I would like to place this on record that e-cigarettes adversely affects the cardiovascular system. Hindi na po yung respiratory, hindi na po yung lungs. With a number of studies linking them to impaired functioning of blood vessels. A recent cross-sectional study found that daily e-cigarette use is associated with increased risk of heart attacks. An additional effect in those also smoking. Ito po yung nangyari dun sa 16 years old sa Cebu. So, the health risk associated with e-cigarettes, while uncertain, they cannot be considered safe. And I'm quoting the European Public Health Association journal. And again, there are several landmark studies produced by the American Heart Association. Ang dami po nito, Mr. President, ibibigay ko na lang sa good sponsor. And it is still continuing. Heart disease, sa Pilipinas po, alam po ng ating good sponsor sa Pilipinas, ang namamatay po sa atake sa puso, 1,591 daily. Ito po yung record natin noong 2016. Ang namatay po sa buong 2016 sa heart attack, 582,183. Of course, not related to vape. Mr. President, gusto ko pong ilagay sa record itong hidden formaldehyde. Ito po yung ginagamit sa pang-imbalsa mo. May chemical din po yung e-cigarette na kabahagi ito, propylene glycol, glycerol, nicotine, formaldehyde containing hemyat cetals, at marami pa hong iba. I'm not talking about cancer, I'm not talking about lung diseases, I'm talking about cardiovascular diseases. Sa dinami-dami po nito, Mr. President, ang tanong ko po sa good sponsor, Mr. President, bakit po hayaan natin maglipa na ulito? Kahit may pruweba naman po tayo na napakadelikado. Bakit hindi po natin hayaan muna na mapatunayan na safe ito bago natin ipalabas sa merkado, gawing legal, i-regulate at buwisan, Mr. President?
Mr. President, let me respond first to the gentleman's first question, if he needs to put this on record or he will just submit this
Of
into
course,
the
Mr.
record.
President,
I
one-liner lang po.
I welcome that he keeps repeating this because there is a lot of misinformation on how safe or how much safer are vapes and e-cigs compared to cigarettes. And so the more that His Honor would cite studies and medical reports on how unsafe these products are, I believe that it will help all of us here come to the conclusions that we need to when we vote on the rates. Right now, we're just talking about the rates. That is the only area that this committee can handle. So I do welcome that His Honor continues to mention, whether he wants to mention a few more now or later on as he continues to ask questions, to put it in whenever. He is more than welcome. And I would even ask His Honor to continue to participate next when we resume the debates and the period of amendment, because it is very important that we are aware that these products still pose a health risk. In fact, I would like to also put on record that the FDA had warned Juul Labs they called them to task because Juul had made statements such as Juul is much safer than cigarettes. And they were called to task because they are not allowed to say that. To be specific, FDA said, regardless of where products like e-cigarettes fall on the continuum of tobacco product risk, the law is clear that before marketing tobacco products for reduced risk, companies must demonstrate with scientific evidence that their specific product does in fact pose less risk or is less harmful. Juul has ignored the law and very concerningly has made some of these statements in schools to our nation's youth. That's the situation of Juul. I'd like to add to that what I learned when I was in London.
May I know whose statement was that you read?
Yes, Mr. President, this is the FDA in the United States.
FDA. US FDA.
US FDA. US FDA.
Why is it that I received a different US FDA? Would like to give you a copy.
Sure. Actually, I am happy to clarify this, Mr. President. Yesterday, when Senator Gordon was interpellating, he mentioned that what he is aware of is that the U.S. has cleared Juul for sale. But I likewise clarified that it was cleared for sale, but they cannot make claims that it is safer. Those are two different things, Mr. President. So, and that seems to be a source of confusion to most. In fact, I would not know that unless I studied it, that there are different layers of approvals here. And even in England, I was told that they cannot make they can make a claim that it is less harmful if they can prove it. So may ganun po yun.
Just for the record,
Yes, Mr. President.
this is an FDA, US FDA news release
Yes.
found on their website, but hindi pala vape, heated tobacco pala. Ang sabi nila, following rigorous science-based review through the Pre-Market Tobacco Product Application Pathway, PMTA, the agency determined that authorizing these products for the U.S. market is appropriate for the protection of the public health because among several key considerations, the products produce fewer or lower levels of some toxins than combustible cigarettes. The product authorized for sale include the IQOS device. Ano pala? Heated tobacco pala to, sorry. Hindi vape.
Mr. President, I'd like to clarify, thank you for that clarification, that it refers to heated tobacco. But I'd also like to spread into the record that that is also an authorization for the product to be available on the market. But it does not allow them to make any claims that it is safer. In fact, Mr. President, I recall in my hearing, when I called the attention of Philip Morris, who was there for ICOS, I said, you are not allowed to make those statements that it is safer. And if I recall correctly, the response was, well, I am just saying it here in a closed environment, not in public. So yun lang po yung danger doon. Kasi they will then, that will be quoted by media, and then sasabihin na, totoo namang sinabi yon, but they're not allowed to make those claims.
Yes, the correct statement they should make is that it has lesser toxins than combustible cigarettes. Instead of saying safer.
Actually, Mr. President, from my understanding is they cannot make those claims. They are allowed to sell it because yun, parang ganun ho yung findings. However, they cannot make those claims. They cannot write about it. They cannot tell people because siguro po of the misinformation that it would generate sa public.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I asked the good sponsor, and I would like to perhaps abbreviate this. Mahaba pa sana to, pero tumitingin sa akin si Majority Floor Leader kanina. It has something to do with the flavors. My question is, why are e-cigarettes, especially the flavored ones, appealing especially to the youth and young adults? Mr. President, meron na kayang nakita ang ating good sponsor ng mga senior citizen na nagve-vape ng iba't ibang flavor? Kasi ang kine-claim ng Juul at nung iba, substitute daw for smoking. I've seen a lot of senior citizens, when I go out, wala naman po ako nakita pang senior citizen na nagve-vape. Ang tanong ko po, Mr. President, sa ating sponsor, why are e-cigarettes and vapes appealing especially to the youth and the young adults? Diba dapat sila yung pinoprotektahan pa natin? Bakit wala tayo nakikita ang mga senior citizens kung talagang substitute ito na nagve-vape? I have yet to see a senior citizen smoker na grupo-grupo sila na nandun sa smoking area at nagve-vape. Natatawa po yung iba nating Senate staff dito. Can I have an answer, Mr. Exception. Can we have an answer, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. His Honor is right in his appreciation that e-cigarettes are marketed like tech products, and so ilag doon ang matanda, pero mahilig doon ang bata. I mean, in a way, no, it makes sense. And then the other thing is, it can be very discreetly used, which is, again, poses another danger to the youth because a lot of them have been caught using vapes even in the school premises, even inside the classroom, kasi parang ballpen lang, yung pala nagve-vape na. So that's why e-cigarettes tend to be very attractive to the youth. Sabi ko nga kanina, this behavioral scientist said that it is like technology on a stick, a perfect fit for the smartphone generation. You can even sync it with your smartphone to let you know how much you have vaped. On that note, I don't know if the gentleman has caught the news that Apple, has cut ties with the vapes because they realize that it's becoming an exciting thing. So they've chosen not to be a part of it. But I do want to add to the discussion on whether it is how come it is vaping seems to be more attractive to the youth and not to the older ones. Well, for one, this representation did encounter a vapor that was presented to us by the group that we met in London. And this gentleman was part of a pro-vaping association that would really go around to target smokers to help them make that switch. And I understand what they were trying to do. They're trying to help smokers switch to a different product. which they deemed to be less harmful. But what bothered me was that this adult smoker, he was probably in his 40s, explained how in the beginning he did not even want to try vaping because he was really happy with his smoking, but eventually he tried it, and at first he wasn't sold onto it until he slowly got into it. And then eventually, at first he was only using one flavor. I think it was even tobacco flavor. But now he's into so many flavors. So that is my worry, because you now also might have a generation who are addicted to these flavors, because he very happily volunteered that information that he loves these flavors and switches back and forth. No problem po kung talagang sure na tayo na wala ngang harm yon. Pero that is the problem. And the one last thing I would like to add to the equation is this. This is my notes, no, from the behavioral scientists that we also met in London. I'm just going to look for it, but I already spotted it a minute ago. The behavioral scientist said that smoking is aspirational for kids. If they see their parents smoking, not necessarily their parents, but when they see adults smoking, it becomes aspirational for them to also do what the adults are doing one day. And so if you now have a generation of vaping adults, then you could very well also have a generation of vaping young people.
I agree, Mr. President. In fact, Mr. President, the interviews conducted relative to our Cebuana vape ICU lung victim validated that she switches from vapes to regular smoking. So lumalabas po, Mr. President, contrary to the claims of the e-cigarette manufacturers that it is a substitute for regular smoking, mas marami pa hong yung bata ang napupunta doon sa regular smoking universe, Mr. President. But I'd like to focus on some taxation issues. The good sponsor agreed with me that most of those vapors are the youth. The e-cigarette smokers are the youth. And perhaps the Department of Finance family can study this. One of the basic principles of taxation is equity. Equity. And equity has something to do with a tax system based on the principle of equal sacrifice or ability to pay based on personal circumstances. When you refer to the youth as a separate segment of the vape buyers, sino po ba ang mas may pera? Yung mga kabataang grade school, grade 11, grade 12, o yung mas matatandang adults na matagal na nagtatrabaho?
Siyempre po, yung nagtatrabaho.
Yung nagtatrabaho. Pero dito sa ating lalabas na buwis, ang ating papatawan ng buwis dito ay yung mga batang bumibili ng vapes. Hindi po yung matatanda. So, going to the principle of equity in taxation, it would appear, Mr. President, that this would be, I can use the term discriminatory. We will now be taxing a segment of the population which does not have that appropriate ability to pay. Tama po ba yan, Mr. President? Ang bubisa natin, yung hindi nga makakabayad.
Well, Mr. President, that is always the equitableness of taxation is always an issue raised, especially if it's a single tax, because the argument is the poor, and in this case that you are mentioning, the youth, would really have less money to pay, and therefore, in that sense, they would be carrying the tax burden. However, Mr. President, that being said, in addition to the taxation measure, there should really be very strong health regulatory measures precisely to ensure that these vapes do not fall into the hands of the youth. And I know the concern of His Honor is precisely that, well, we might be too late for that, because there has already been massive marketing internationally which our youth have been have seen and have been brainwashed about, and a lot of them are already very interested in vaping. So, that is the dilemma we are confronted with.
I agree, Mr. President, but my flavored question a while ago referred to the flavors, which apparently, and I quote a study here, these flavors enhance the appeal of the cigarettes by creating sensory perceptions of sweetness and coolness and masking the aversive taste of nicotine. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, yung pong karamihan sa mga senior citizens na naninigarilyo, hindi naman nagbe-vape, ang gusto lang talaga nila, yung sigarilyo lang talaga. Naaakit po ang mga kabataan dahil dito sa mga flavors. Kung sakali po, Mr. President, papayag kaya ang ating good sponsor na ang ipagbawal na lamang ay yung mga flavored electronic cigarettes? Kasi vape din naman po yun, may aerosol din, wala lang pong amoy orange, amoy mango, amoy strawberry, at iba pa.
Ang position po natin, ang position po ng chair ng committee is to ban flavors. At most, it would be tobacco flavored or menthol. Meron ho tayong willing ho tayong mag-compromise on an alternative to tobacco flavor, which would be menthol.
Because
Pero hindi po tayo sang-ayon dun sa maraming flavor kasi nga we have seen how this has become the main attraction of the youth.
I agree, Mr. President, kasi we can conclude that the prevalence of utilization of e-cigs by the youth is really associated with the artificial flavors. Kung alisin mo yung flavor, baka mabawasan na po yung gagamit ng e-cigarettes, Mr. President. So, I'm glad that the good sponsor is amenable to ban the flavors if the e-cigs will really be regulated. And I think that's an indication that she's really amenable, Mr. President, to pursue health issues aside, no offense, aside from mere revenues, Mr. President.
His Honor's observation is correct.
And last point, Mr. President. The good
Before His Honor goes into the last point, I'd just like to read into the record a clarificatory.
Last 4 points.
Sure, no problem with that, Mr. President. I'd just like to read, spread into the record, our Senate President had a question to clarify what was the statement of FDA in its news release on April 30, 29. I'd just like to read into the record that the complete statement there is that the agency, the FDA, determined that authorizing these products for the U.S. market is appropriate for the protection of the public health because, among several key considerations, the products produce fewer or lower levels of some toxins than combustible cigarettes. The next part of that statement is, the products authorized for sale include IQOS device, Marlboro heat sticks, Marlboro smooth menthol heat sticks, and Marlboro fresh menthol heat sticks. While today's action permit the tobacco products to be sold in the U.S., it does not mean that these products are safe or FDA approved. All tobacco products are potentially harmful and addictive, and those who do not use tobacco products should continue not to. Additionally, today's action is not a decision on the separate modified risk tobacco product application that the company also submitted. That's a little bit more technical. But I just want to be very clear that these are not even FDA-approved products, which I might have unintentionally made it appear to be. It is simply a declaration that it can be sold. Thank you, Mr. President.
I agree, Mr. President. And again, to gently remind the good sponsors, also the chair of the Committee on Sustainable
Development Goals and Future Thinking.
The precautionary principle is a part of that Sustainable Development Goals coming from the United Nations, states that the principle states that in case of serious or irreversible threats to the health of humans or the ecosystem, acknowledged scientific uncertainty should not be used as a reason to postpone preventive measures, unquote. And preventive measure perhaps should include banning, partially banning,
yes,
and banning the importation of the products, Mr. President. So I think I agree that the good chair of this Committee on Sustainable Development would pursue the precautionary principle as part of these discussions, and it was affirmed by a Supreme Court decision. One last point, Mr. President. We already agreed as a tax principle that taxes are not concerned with legality or illegality of a transaction. That taxes should be neutral. My last proposition, Mr. President. Would the gentle lady agree that taxing vape or e-cigarettes is not inconsistent with banning vapes or e-cigarettes?
Well, Mr. President, one of the main reasons I believe that there is a hesitancy to ban is precisely because of the fact that there are already a lot of people using it and it would still be in the market somehow. And therefore, if there was a ban and these products are somehow being sold illegally, then why should you, I don't believe that DOF would hesitate to tax the same. And therefore, my answer to your question is, yes, it is not inconsistent.
So it would, in effect, produce the conclusion that even banned products can be taxed. During Christmas season, we're now nearing the New Year holiday revelry. In some areas, the firecrackers, fireworks are banned. But you can buy it from some stores in Bulacan. In some areas, you're only allowed to light up your firecrackers in some central areas, the poblacion. So would that be a correct proposition that even banned products can be the subject of tax?
My response would be yes, should be, because I personally do not see I feel that in terms of equity, if you will tax a company or a person who is involved in a legitimate basis, and this person is legitimately filing his taxes, selling, keeping himself within the boundaries of what is legal, why should you let that person who is selling a banned product get away with it and not tax?
When you say banned product, you mean, does it mean it is an illegal product?
That's probably a good consequence, Mr. President.
Well, then we should tax shabu.
And a lot of other things, Mr. President.
The
Just
minority
with
leader.
the permission of
Of course.
of our colleagues on the floor, the question raised by the good gentleman from Cavite raises a
confusing.
question in my mind. Can we tax the services of a prostitute?
Following,
Because it is obviously not allowed by law. Now, if in the discussion that I was listening to, it would appear that it is consistent with our laws and our Internal Revenue Code to tax the act of prostitution.
does His Honor want the gentleman who posed the question to answer it? Why not? So the chair can take a
I'm
break.
raising that question because of the discussion between the two gentlemen, the lady and the gentleman on the floor.
Yes.
Anyone can answer it. That's just what bothers me.
In the question, might as well answer also my question that we should tax shabu.
Yes, that's in the same vein, the same line, Mr. President. Smoking, the use of shabu is illegal. Now, can we tax those who are using shabu? To me, I have no answer myself, Mr. President, but I'm seeking the guidance of our two colleagues, because I would think that the use of vapor, of e-cigarettes, is legal. There is no law which declares it illegal. So we do not have to go into the very difficult question of trying to tax an illegal act, because this is not an illegal act. I mean, vaping and use of e-cigarettes. Because otherwise, we'll get into very complicated questions,
Yeah,
Mr.
that's right.
President.
If I may be permitted to, with the permission of the majority floor leader, the reason why I raised that is not just to confuse the good sponsor, but
Salamat ah.
as I posited early on, the National Internal Revenue Code imposes taxes in all income derived from whatever source, legal or illegal. And I claim, and I still claim, while the good minority floor leader stated a while ago that there is no law declaring vapes as illegal, there is no law also declaring vapes as legal. So my statement, Mr. President, is based on my previous assertions and agreed upon by the good sponsor that Yes.
Mr. President, we need a law to declare an act illegal. If there is no law, the act is legal. There is no law today banning or making illegal the use of e-cigarettes.
So there is no use for a law declaring it legal. Because it is not
that's
declared
our
illegal.
position. The
Correct.
law should be to declare it illegal in order that that the use of it shall be punished. Because unless the law declares it as illegal, it is legal.
I respect, Mr. President, the argument coming from the good minority leader, but again, I have explained the basis on taxation, and elementary in law school probably is the limitation on the power of taxation. One, it must be for a public purpose. Two, government entities generally are exempt. Three, non-delegable, cannot be delegated, and should be based on international committee. Number four. Number five, it should be territorial. So we are now in a new sphere, so to speak, trying to find out whether an item newly produced, not yet in the market when we were born, still evolving a few months ago, a few weeks ago, and it still will evolve into something which is dangerous or non-dangerous, the power of the government to invoke taxation, again, must be for a public purpose, and I agree. But I have mentioned the precautionary principle. We should not wait. We should not wait for a scientific conclusion as to the safety or unsafety of a product in order to prevent it from producing harm to society. So scientific uncertainty should not be used as a reason to postpone preventive measures. That is the basis for my previous arguments, and I agree. I respect the argument coming from the minority leader, who is a legal luminary, and I base it. If you track down my argument starting from Al Capone up to this conclusion, I think I produce a thread of something which the good sponsor can slip on, and perhaps include the flavors, and perhaps include the epidemic, and perhaps include the adverse health effects, and perhaps include the youth in the equation, as the good sponsor would continuously study within the next few days, few weeks, the sin tax law. I'm not against the taxes on alcohol and cigarettes. This is just my concern. A newly developed product such as vape and e-cigarettes that probably would flood the market in the months ahead, and probably would produce more injuries to the Filipino youth. Yun lamang po ang tanong ko, Mr. President, and I think I have the concurrence of the good sponsor relative to the health effects of these new products. Maraming salamat po.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just a very short reply before we end we end this session. Definitely the concerns of the gentleman will be part of our will be included in our final decision. In fact, we stand by. We actually agree with all the concerns that the gentleman raised. If I may, I believe that it's our colleagues who we would like to be able to convince to share these concerns that we also have already concluded. What I would like to put on record is that whatever tax rates we come up with, this representation is of the view that taxation should always be used as a tool to achieve our health goals. And that is an indication of why I have the rates that I have. And having said that, I would like to give the gentleman comfort that precisely the FDA has done its job by requiring that certain regulatory steps be taken by those who will be participating in the market by way of selling, displaying. And to this day, that is the problem that is always hovering in the back of my mind, because the TRO is effectively preventing the FDA from doing its job. So that is a big concern that this representation has. When His Honor said that he is afraid that the market would be flooded with this product, I am afraid too, because the requirement of FDA requires that there are steps that must be taken so that FDA can take cognizance of what these products are, what is in it. And right now, there is a TRO. So that is a problem. But the rates that we will propose are in line with our objective to use taxation as a tool to achieve our health goals. Thank you, Mr. President, for His Honor's interventions.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a manifestation of my support to the good sponsor in taking into account the health issues, I please make it of record that I am now giving some documents that probably would aid the committee chair in his discernment insofar as the proper approach is concerned. I give her the good sponsor the latest ordinance coming from the city of San Francisco, circa 1919, banning e-cigarettes, that the very place where Juul was born. And then I produced likewise, and I'm handing over the latest law coming from the state of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, just to aid the good sponsor on tackling this matter, which would probably aid her as she pursues her Sustainable Development Goals Committee chairmanship, Mr. President. For the record.
Two you, Mr. President. We are happy to receive this from the gentleman. Thank you, Majority Floor Leader, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you to the two distinguished ladies, lady and gentlemen. With that, Mr. President, before we move to suspend, we'd just like to let the body know that we'll be tackling this again on December 9 and 10. And hopefully we can wrap up the discussions and vote on it on December 10. That's our commitment to Senator Pia and the DOF team. So with that, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1074.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is suspended.
Mr. President, I got information that the House of Representatives Bicam conferees is now has already reached 23 members. I think they found out we were 17 members or 15 members, more than them, so they decided to increase their number. Oh, well, good luck to our conferees. Mr. President, just a bit of housekeeping before we adjourn. I move to elect the members of the contingent to the Congressional Oversight Committee on Ease of Doing Business under Ease of Doing Business. It's the Oversight Committee on Ease of Doing Business.
Congressional Oversight Committee on Ease of Doing Business.
Yes,
This is the Senate Committee on Trade.
That's correct, Mr. President. And I so move, Mr. President, you have to declare the members.
Yes, we would like to merely add to the mandated members already. So we designate Senator Francis Pangilinan and Senator Francis Tolentino.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, because there's a consensus, first of all, we'd like to put on record, and lest we be misinterpreted that we are taking a break. But next week is the start of the SEA Games.
No, it's Saturday.
Actually, this Saturday, but the games officially really start on December 1 to 11, or 1 to 10, Mr. President. There will be difficulty for many of our staff to come into work on those
Staff
days.
and employees of the
We have,
Senate.
but for the record, we have no work on December 2, which is Monday, which is Pasay City Day, which is already a holiday for the residents and businesses in Pasay City, where we are located. And therefore, we have no work on Monday. On the 3rd and 4th will be the thick of the SEA Games activities
Within this
within
area.
the area, PICC and many other areas. So there will be blockades and rerouting, which may be difficult to attend to our duties here. Not to mention the fact, Mr. President, next week also will be the Bicameral Conference Committee meetings. And since we have 15 members in the BICAM, I don't think we'll be able to achieve a quorum in the plenary. And therefore, with that, Mr. President, with the concurrence of my minority floor leader and the and the majority members, the minority members, we had agreed to start our work week at December 9. That way, we can already will be a bit. We would have finished a number of games within the area, SEA Games.
But
Mr. President.
just for the record, and so that it is, I'm sure there are people monitoring this, it doesn't mean that the Bicameral Conference Committee will not continue.
No,
the
it will-
Bicam
yes,
Conference Committee
will continue, Mr. President.
will continue starting on Friday up to next week.
Yes, Mr.
Ano? And but your proposal, your motion is to adjourn the session
Yes,
until
the plan is to adjourn until December 9. But before we adjourn, I'd just like to wish a best of luck to my colleague in the NSA, Senator Francis Tolentino, for your kickboxing team, and hopefully for our Heinous team also, which are playing December 1, 2, and 3,
and the 10-pin bowling team.
and the 10-pin bowling team, which you are also a benefactor of, sir.
And
And
chairman,
we wish good luck also to the brother of the distinguished lady senator, Senator Pia Cayetano. I hope that the SEA Games will be conducted well, and it will be successful, not only for our hosting it, but also for as a source of national pride. Hopefully, we win a lot of medals. And advance happy birthday to Tito Frank. Drilon, happy birthday. When is your birthday, sir? Uy, walang blue. Next week, yes. We will not forget of course, the customary.
when we
blue.
resume, yes. So
When we resume,
we
December
will
9.
not let him
Mr.
escape.
President.
December 9. No?
Happy birthday, sir, for
we
the
will
record.
be expecting Batchoy from Iloilo, La Paz.
Yes, Mr. President. So happy birthday to our distinguished minority floor leader, sir.
Yes, sir.
With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session till December 9, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, December 9, 2019. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The session is adjourned until December 9, Monday, 2019,
Thank you, Mr. President.
at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.